It was an ordinary afternoon in a quiet neighborhood, and she was walking home, her baby cradled carefully in her arms. The streets were familiar, the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other and children played near their homes. But that day, something unexpected changed everything in a matter of minutes. Out of nowhere, a patrol car turned the corner, lights flashing and engine rumbling, stopping directly in front of her. She froze, unsure why they were paying attention to her. She had done nothing wrong. Her heart beat faster as the officers stepped out, their faces stern and unyielding. She held her baby tighter, instinctively shielding the small, fragile life in her arms. The officers' commands were sharp, almost harsh, and she tried to speak calmly, explaining that she was just walking home. But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. One officer reached for a leash, and the growl of a K-9 unit filled the air. The dog was massive, muscles tense and teeth bared. It lunged forward, teeth snapping just inches from her baby. Fear gripped her chest like a vice, her instincts screaming to protect her child at all costs. She pressed herself against the nearest wall, wrapping her arms tightly around the baby and backing away slowly. Neighbors began to notice the commotion. Some came out of their homes, their faces filled with concern. One elderly woman shouted, asking the officers to calm down. Others began recording the scene with their phones, sensing the seriousness of what was unfolding. The baby's cries pierced the tense air, echoing down the street. She could feel the tiny body trembling in her arms. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not just from fear, but from the overwhelming injustice of the situation. She had never imagined that a simple walk home could turn into such a terrifying ordeal. Despite her pleas and attempts to explain, the officers remained aggressive. The K-9 growled and circled, sniffing and pawing at her feet. Each movement of the dog sent shivers through her body. She knew she had to remain calm. Any sudden move could provoke the dog or the officers further. She kept talking, her voice steady despite the panic rising inside her. She reminded herself that she had to protect her child, that nothing else mattered in that moment. Every second felt like an eternity. Then something unexpected happened. One of the neighbors, a young man who lived across the street, stepped forward with his phone in hand. He started recording, capturing everything, the harsh commands, the snarling dog, the terrified mother clutching her baby. The officers barked at him to step back, but he kept filming, understanding that this evidence could be vital. She whispered a quick thank you to him, grateful that someone was seeing what was happening. The more the camera rolled, the more she felt a small sense of hope. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the officers decided to leave. The dog was called back, the patrol car door slammed, and the vehicle sped away. She stood in the middle of the street, her heart still pounding, baby still crying in her arms. Relief washed over her, but it was mixed with anger and disbelief. How could something like this happen? Why did they treat her like a criminal when she had done nothing wrong? Her hands shook as she tried to soothe her baby, rocking gently and whispering soft, calming words. As the adrenaline faded, she realized she couldn't let this incident go unnoticed. It wasn't just about her. It was about the safety of every mother, every child, every innocent person who could face this kind of aggression. She pulled out her own phone and began searching for ways to report the abuse. Her mind raced, thinking about lawyers, civil rights groups, and anyone who could help ensure the officers were held accountable. She knew that the video recorded by her neighbor would be critical evidence, but she also understood that she needed to act quickly before the story was buried. By evening, the video had started circulating online. Friends and neighbors shared it, and soon it caught the attention of local journalists. Social media lit up with outrage, people expressing shock at what they had seen. The video showed not just the aggressive dog, but the fear in her eyes, the trembling of her baby, and the blatant disregard for human life by the officers. It was undeniable evidence of misconduct, and the public response was immediate. Messages of support flooded in, many promising to help however they could. For the first time since the incident, she felt a sense of strength growing inside her. The next morning, she contacted a well-known civil rights attorney who specialized in cases of police misconduct. She described everything in detail, providing names, times, and locations. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding with understanding and empathy. He assured her that the law was on her side, that the video evidence would speak volumes, and that together they could pursue justice. Her confidence grew with every word, the fear that had consumed her slowly being replaced by determination. Over the following days, she worked tirelessly with the attorney, They reached out to witnesses, including the neighbors who had filmed the incident or had seen it unfold. Each statement added weight to the case, creating an undeniable narrative of what had really happened. She began speaking with local advocacy groups who provided guidance, support, and a platform to share her story more widely. Every phone call, every meeting, every shared post on social media strengthened her resolve, but it wasn't easy. She faced criticism and doubt from some corners, people who questioned her motives or dismissed the seriousness of the incident. That made her more determined. She refused to let fear or intimidation stop her. She knew the truth, and she knew that justice had to be served, not just for her and her baby, but for anyone who might face such brutality in the future. Every sleepless night spent rocking her child, every anxious moment waiting for responses, every tear shed over the injustice became fuel for her fight. By the end of the first week, the story had exploded across local and national media. News channels interviewed her, showing the video footage and highlighting her courage. People began to recognize her not just as a victim, but as someone standing up to an unjust system. Support poured in from all directions: letters, donations, legal advice, and messages of encouragement. It became clear that her determination had sparked something larger than herself, a movement demanding accountability and fairness. She remained focused, however, on the next steps. She continued to meet with her attorney, preparing to ensure that the officers involved would face consequences. She knew the path ahead would be challenging and long, but she also knew that she had already taken the most important step, refusing to remain silent. Her courage had become a shield for her child and a beacon for anyone who might face similar injustice in the future. In the quiet moments, when she held her baby close and reflected on what had happened, she felt a mix of emotions: fear, anger, sadness, but also hope and strength. She realized that life could change in an instant, that ordinary days could turn into moments of extraordinary courage. But she also realized that in those moments she had a choice: to be consumed by fear or to rise and fight. She chose to rise. By the end of part 1, the stage was set. The incident that could have broken her spirit instead became the spark for action. She was no longer just a mother trying to protect her child. She was now a force demanding accountability, and as she looked toward the days ahead, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others who believed in justice, fairness, and courage in the face of fear. 1,400 words. The morning after the incident, she woke up with her baby in her arms, the small fingers curling tightly around hers. Sleep had been brief and filled with restless thoughts. Every sound outside, every passing car made her heart race. But she knew she couldn't let fear rule her life. The events from the day before replayed in her mind: the growling dog, the aggressive officers, the helpless cries of her child. She pressed the baby closer, whispering comforting words, and reminded herself that she had taken the first step toward justice. She started her day by reviewing the video footage again. The neighbor's recording was clear, showing everything in vivid detail. Each second captured the terror she had experienced, the blatant disregard for her safety, and the unwavering aggression of the officers. She felt a mix of anger and empowerment. Anger because what had happened was completely unjust, and empowerment because now she had undeniable proof. This video, she realized, was her weapon in the fight for justice, and she wasn't going to let it go to waste. By mid-morning, her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Messages from people she had never met before poured in. Some offered legal advice, some shared stories of similar experiences, and many simply offered words of support. She felt a sense of community forming around her. The fear that had gripped her yesterday began to transform into determination. She realized she was no longer alone. There were people ready to stand beside her, amplify her voice, and make sure her story was heard. She contacted the civil rights attorney she had spoken with briefly the previous day. Their first meeting had left her feeling hopeful, but now she was ready to take the next steps. They discussed filing a formal complaint with the police department and exploring civil litigation. The lawyer explained the process in detail, outlining what evidence would be most effective and how they could protect her rights. She listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions, her resolve growing stronger with every word. She understood that this was more than a personal battle. It was about standing up against abuse and ensuring that no one else would have to face what she had endured. After the meeting, She reached out to the neighbors who had witnessed the incident. Each person she spoke with reaffirmed her story. One neighbor described seeing the dog lunge and how she had instinctively shielded her child. Another remembered the officer's harsh commands and the fear in her eyes. Each account added weight to her case, painting a vivid picture of what had really happened. She felt a sense of relief and validation. She wasn't imagining things. The fear, the trauma, the injustice, they were all real, and now she had proof and witnesses on her side. As the days passed, the story began to gain traction online. Social media users shared the video widely, commenting on the bravery of a mother protecting her child against unreasonable aggression. Hashtags began trending, drawing attention from news outlets and civil rights organizations. She watched in awe as her story spread, touching people far beyond her neighborhood. Some reached out offering support, advice, or connections to lawyers who had experience in similar cases. She realized that the incident had sparked something much larger than she had anticipated, a conversation about accountability, justice, and the treatment of innocent civilians. Despite the growing attention, she faced challenges. Some people questioned her motives or criticized her actions. They said she was exaggerating or making a fuss, but she refused to let their doubt deter her. She knew the truth and she had proof. She reminded herself daily why she was doing this, not for fame, not for attention, but to protect her child and hold those responsible accountable. Every night as she rocked her baby to sleep, she silently promised that she would not rest until justice was served. One evening, a local journalist contacted her, asking to cover her story in detail. She agreed, wanting to ensure that the narrative remained accurate and that her voice was heard. The journalist came to her home, speaking with her carefully and asking her to describe the incident in her own words. She recounted the fear, the panic, the protective instinct that had guided her every move. She spoke about the baby's cries, the neighbors' reactions, and the officer's unreasonable behavior. She spoke honestly, without exaggeration, allowing the truth to resonate. The article was published the next day, accompanied by images and clips from the video. The response was immediate. People expressed outrage at the behavior of the officers, empathy for the mother, and support for her efforts to seek justice. Comments flooded in, many sharing similar experiences, and the story gained momentum rapidly. She realized that the public attention wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of authority. The story had become a symbol, a reflection of a larger issue in society. Meanwhile, she continued working closely with her attorney. They prepared a formal complaint, detailing every aspect of the incident from the officer's actions to the baby's distress. They included statements from neighbors, medical notes, and the video evidence. She attended meetings, answered questions, and made sure every detail was accurate. She felt a sense of control returning to her life. For the first time since the incident, she felt that she had power over the narrative, and that power became a source of strength. The police department responded slowly, at first with vague statements and promises to investigate, but the growing public pressure and media coverage accelerated their actions. Internal Affairs began reviewing the incident, and the officers involved were placed on temporary leave. She knew that this was only a first step, but it was an important one. The fact that the department was taking notice signaled that her efforts were beginning to make an impact. She also realized that this was a pivotal moment for her, and for anyone who might face similar threats in the future. As the days went on, she became more involved in advocacy work. She connected with community organizations, participated in meetings, and shared her story publicly. She wanted to use her experience to educate others about their rights and the importance of documenting incidents. She encouraged other mothers, parents, and civilians to speak up if they faced misconduct. Her courage inspired others, and she felt a sense of purpose growing inside her. She was no longer just a victim. She was a voice for justice. Even in moments of exhaustion, when the weight of the ordeal threatened to overwhelm her, she found ways to remain strong. She focused on small victories, getting a response from the police department, seeing her story published, receiving messages of support. She leaned on her neighbors, friends, and her attorney, understanding that collective strength could overcome fear and intimidation. And most importantly, she remained focused on her baby, whose safety and well-being were her guiding force. By the end of Part 2, it was clear that the incident had set off a chain of events that could not be ignored. She had transformed from a frightened mother into a determined advocate, ready to face challenges and fight for justice. Her story had captured the attention of her community and the nation, and she was prepared to take the next steps in ensuring that the officers responsible were held accountable. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to make a difference, not just for herself but for countless others who might face similar threats. The momentum continued to build. With every interview, every meeting, and every post shared online, she grew more confident in her ability to influence change. She had turned a terrifying moment into a platform for accountability, courage, and hope. And even though the journey ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would not be silenced, and she would not stop until justice was served for her and her baby. The days after her story began circulating were both exhausting and empowering. Every morning she woke up to messages of support, advice, and encouragement from people she had never met. Some shared similar experiences, expressing empathy for what she and her baby had endured. Others offered guidance on how to navigate the complex world of legal action. Each message reminded her that she was not alone, and that her story was resonating far beyond the boundaries of her neighborhood. She continued working closely with her attorney, preparing for the next steps in her fight for justice. Together, they reviewed every piece of evidence, the video recorded by her neighbor, eyewitness accounts, medical reports, and her own detailed notes about the incident. Every detail mattered. Every small action, every expression captured on film, would contribute to building an undeniable case against the officers. She was meticulous, making sure nothing was overlooked. The more she prepared, the more confident she became in the strength of her case. Meanwhile, the public response grew louder. Social media posts, articles, and news segments focused on her courage and the injustice she had faced. People from all walks of life reached out, sharing messages of solidarity and pledging support. She began to realize that her personal struggle had turned into a larger movement, a conversation about accountability, safety, and fairness. For the first time, she felt the power of her voice and the impact it could have. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for anyone who could face similar situations in the future. The police department, now under intense scrutiny, began their internal investigation. Officers involved were placed on administrative leave, and their actions were being reviewed in detail. She knew this was just the beginning, but it was a significant step. The fear and intimidation she had initially felt was slowly being replaced by a sense of agency. She realized that by standing up, documenting everything, and seeking help, she had taken control of a situation that could have easily overwhelmed her. She also began connecting with local advocacy groups focused on civil rights and police accountability. These groups offered advice, legal support, and a platform to share her story more broadly. She attended meetings and shared her experience, highlighting the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of documenting incidents. Her story inspired others to speak up, creating a network of support that extended far beyond her immediate circle. She felt proud, not just for herself but for the positive impact she was having on her community. Despite the growing momentum, the process was emotionally taxing. Recalling the incident, answering questions repeatedly, and reliving the fear she had felt was draining. Some nights she would lie awake, her baby asleep beside her, and the images of the dog lunging, the officers shouting, and the panic in her own heart would replay in vivid detail. But she refused to let these memories break her spirit. Instead, she used them as motivation, a reminder of why she was fighting and why she could not give up. Every interaction with the media became an opportunity to control the narrative and share her truth. She gave interviews, explaining not just the events that had occurred but also the emotional impact it had on her and her child. She emphasized the importance of accountability and the need for systemic change. Each interview further strengthened public awareness, and the growing support helped sustain her through the difficult moments. She began to see that her story was not just about fear or victimhood, it was about courage, resilience, and the fight for justice. Her attorney also worked to involve witnesses who had seen the incident unfold. Neighbors came forward providing statements that corroborated her version of events. Some had recorded video clips from different angles, capturing additional details that reinforced her account. Each statement and clip added weight to the case, making it increasingly difficult for the officers or the department to dismiss or downplay the incident. She felt a growing sense of relief knowing that she was not fighting this battle alone. As the investigation progressed, protests and community actions began to take shape. People gathered outside the police department, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding justice. They spoke of the incident, the video evidence, and the need for accountability. She watched from home, feeling a mixture of awe and gratitude. The community's response was overwhelming, showing that her story had become a symbol of resistance against abuse and injustice. It also strengthened her determination to see the process through, knowing that the public was watching and expecting accountability. The police department, under increasing pressure, started to make statements about the ongoing investigation. They promised transparency, fairness, and a thorough review of the events. While she remained cautious, she recognized that public scrutiny was forcing them to act. The officers involved could no longer operate without consequences. The balance of power was shifting, and her careful documentation, persistence, and courage were playing a central role. During this period, she also focused on her child's well-being. The trauma of the incident had affected both of them. She sought medical and psychological support to ensure that the baby's early experiences of fear would not leave lasting scars. She spent extra time soothing, playing, and bonding with her child, understanding that protection extended beyond physical safety. Her attention to nurturing her baby became a source of strength and a reminder of why she had to continue fighting. Even as the legal and public process moved forward, she faced moments of doubt. Some nights, exhaustion and fear would creep back in, and she questioned whether she could continue. But she reminded herself of what she had already accomplished: the recording of the incident, the gathering of witnesses, the mobilization of community support. She thought about the message she was sending to others, that standing up even when afraid could lead to meaningful change. These reminders reignited her determination. The attorney outlined the next steps: filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, preparing civil litigation, and continuing to leverage public attention to ensure accountability. She listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. Every plan was broken down in clear, manageable steps, which helped her feel less overwhelmed and more focused. She realized that this process, while long and challenging, was structured and achievable. She had allies, resources, and the truth on her side. Community organizations continued to provide support. They helped her navigate interviews, prepared her for court appearances, and connected her with other families who had experienced similar situations. These connections became a lifeline, providing guidance, solidarity, and encouragement. She learned that advocacy was not just about fighting one battle, but about building networks of support and amplifying voices for systemic change. By the end of Part 3, she had grown significantly, not just as a mother, but as a community advocate and a determined seeker of justice. The fear and panic of the initial incident had been replaced by strategy, courage, and resilience. She had learned the importance of documentation, the power of community, and the impact of speaking her truth. Her story was now larger than herself, reaching others and inspiring change. She understood that the journey ahead would be challenging. Legal battles were never easy, public scrutiny could be harsh, and the emotional toll was ongoing. But she also knew that she had already transformed a moment of terror into a catalyst for action. She was no longer powerless. She was informed, prepared, and supported. She had become a symbol of what one determined individual could achieve when refusing to accept injustice. As she held her baby that evening, she thought about the road ahead. She felt pride in how far she had come, and a quiet confidence in her ability to see the process through. She knew that accountability was possible, that the officers could be held responsible, and that systemic change was achievable. And while the journey was far from over, she felt ready to face it step by step with courage, determination, and the love that had always guided her love for her child. The days turned into weeks, and her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The initial fear she had felt when the K-9 unit lunged at her and her baby had slowly transformed into a steady determination. She spent her mornings checking updates on the case, reviewing messages of support, and communicating with her attorney. Every detail, every piece of evidence, every witness account was meticulously organized. She knew that this fight was bigger than her fear, and she refused to let exhaustion or doubt stop her from seeking justice. Community support continued to grow. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers rallied behind her. People brought food, offered childcare help, and shared advice on navigating public attention. Local advocacy groups connected her with other families who had experienced similar incidents, creating a network of solidarity that gave her emotional strength. She realized that she was no longer just a mother defending her child. She had become a figure that people looked to for courage, for hope, and for inspiration. Meanwhile, the police department was feeling the pressure. Internal Affairs had begun a thorough investigation, reviewing every detail, watching the video footage repeatedly, and interviewing witnesses. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave, and higher-ranking officials were forced to answer questions about policies and procedures. She could see the system beginning to respond to her actions. The fear and intimidation she had initially experienced were being replaced by a sense of power, the power of documentation, persistence, and truth. Her attorney advised her to prepare for potential civil litigation. They discussed filing formal charges against the officers in the department for misconduct, negligence, and emotional distress. Each meeting was intense, but she felt more confident with every discussion. She learned the legal terminology, the procedures, and the strategies that could ensure justice was served. She understood that this was a marathon, not a sprint, and that every careful step she took now would be critical for the outcome. Media attention continued to grow. News outlets requested interviews, wanting to cover her story in more depth. She spoke calmly and clearly, recounting the events as they happened, emphasizing her role as a mother protecting her child, and highlighting the importance of accountability and justice. Each interview amplified her voice and her story, reaching a wider audience. People began to see her not just as a victim, but as a courageous advocate standing up for the rights of civilians everywhere. Despite the growing attention, she remained focused on her baby. The child's well-being was always her priority. She made sure to provide stability, care, and love, knowing that the trauma of the incident could have lasting effects. She attended checkups, sought advice from child psychologists, and spent time every day playing and bonding with her baby. These moments of normalcy became her sanctuary, a reminder of why she had to keep fighting. Protecting her child meant more than shielding from physical harm. It meant creating an environment of safety, love, and resilience. The community's involvement also extended to organized protests and awareness campaigns. People gathered outside the police department, holding signs, chanting slogans, and demanding accountability. Her story became a symbol of the larger fight against abuse of power and the importance of civilian rights. She felt pride and humility watching others rally for her cause. The movement that had grown around her story gave her the confidence to continue, knowing that she was not alone in this struggle. At the same time, she faced challenges that tested her resolve. Some public comments were critical, attempting to undermine her credibility or question her motives. Others doubted the severity of the incident or dismissed the threat posed by the K-9 unit. Each comment stung, but she refused to let it derail her. She reminded herself of the truth, the fear in her heart, the safety of her baby, the video evidence, and the witnesses who had come forward. These reminders strengthened her determination to see justice done. Her attorney also helped her prepare for potential hearings and depositions. She practiced recounting the incident calmly and clearly, ensuring that her emotions would not overshadow the facts. Every detail mattered: the timing, the sequence of events, the reactions of the officers and the K-9 unit. She learned to anticipate questions, to remain composed, and to focus on the truth. These preparations were challenging, but they gave her confidence that she could face any situation and convey the reality of what had happened. As the investigation continued, she noticed small but meaningful changes within the department. Policies regarding K-9 units and civilian interactions were being reviewed. Officers received additional training, and discussions about accountability and oversight became more prominent. While these changes were not yet complete, she understood that her actions had created tangible impact. One mother's courage had set in motion conversations, reforms, and awareness that could protect countless others. She also took the opportunity to share her experience with broader audiences. Community meetings, educational panels, and advocacy workshops became platforms for her story. She emphasized the importance of documentation, community support, and standing up to injustice. She spoke about fear, courage, and resilience, highlighting how ordinary individuals could create extraordinary change. Each audience she addressed left inspired, reinforcing her belief in the power of truth and persistence. Even during moments of exhaustion, she remained mindful of the progress made. Every interview, every meeting with her attorney, every social media post, and every witness statement brought her closer to the goal of justice. The fear that had once threatened to paralyze her had been replaced by purpose. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She was living proof that determination and careful planning could transform trauma into advocacy and change. By the end of Part 4, the case had entered a critical stage. The police department could no longer ignore public pressure, and the officers involved were facing potential consequences. The foundation for legal action was solid, strengthened by meticulous documentation, credible witnesses, and public support. Her role had evolved from a frightened mother to a powerful advocate, whose story inspired communities and demanded accountability. She held her baby close one evening, reflecting on how far they had come. The incident that had once seemed like the darkest moment of her life had ignited a journey of resilience, courage, and empowerment. She understood that the process ahead would still be challenging, with legal battles, public scrutiny, and emotional trials. Yet she also knew that every step taken, every piece of evidence gathered, and every voice amplified brought her closer to justice. Her determination had become a force that could not be ignored. She had transformed fear into strength, helplessness into advocacy, and a moment of terror into a movement for change. And as she looked at her baby's peaceful face, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next, armed with truth, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice.